Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dennae Handford, and my wife, Dennae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. On the podcast with us today is Patrick Donohoe. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dan. It's awesome to be with you.
Well, Patrick, I want you to get us started and talk to us a little bit about yourself as an entrepreneur and your background and where your current focus is right now.
Sure. Yeah. So I love background stories. I'm not sure if I have a really intriguing one, but my entrepreneur journey really started in college, right? So I played hockey in college for a few years, and then I realized I was too small and too slow to actually make it in the hockey world, and so I actually took a couple years off, did a church service for a few years. And then when I came back, I linked up with the Hartford Public School system, of all places, and did kind of an internship there. And while I was there, I discovered a couple things. I discovered that I didn't want to be a teacher. Also, I discovered that the school systems have major issues. But I also became intrigued with leadership. And also, this was the first time I was introduced to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book by Robert Kiyosaki. The experience itself just shocked. It just totally changed my perspective of the business world and what I wanted to do with a career. And so a few years later, I obviously just was there for I think 4 months. But a few years later, I actually met and started to work with Robert Kiyosaki's original financial advisor, Kim Butler. And I basically adopted a lot of her wealth strategies, and still work with her to this day, and have been doing that for about we're in the 13th year, believe it or not. So it's been an awesome ride.
Well, and I'm sure over those 13 years, you've made some tough decisions, correct?
For sure, yeah.
Well, I want you to get us started on what I call the sore thumb tough decision. And typically when you ask an entrepreneur, what is that one decision that you made as an entrepreneur that did not have that good of an outcome, but you can put your finger on the tough decision and go, yes, that was not a very good outcome, but you're glad you went through it though, because you learned a lot of lessons. So what would you say is that number one, kind of tough decision that you made that had a not so good outcome?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, so, I alluded to the intrigue around leadership that I had mentioned with my background. And I discovered that I wasn't that great of a leader. And it was by making a decision to actually do some layoffs. And so the backstory is, I hired a marketing agency to do a big rebrand. It took like 6 months to do, and new website, new logo, all sorts of just finding our ideal client profile and avatar, and it was extensive and it was super expensive. So I kind of put all of my chips on this one company to help grow the business. And what I realized is it actually took a little bit longer than we thought, and it did not have the impact whatsoever that we were anticipating. And so I was forced to lay off a good piece. At that time, I think we had 60 something employees, and it killed me. It killed my culture, it killed the office, it killed me. I was at the point where I just wanted to shut everything down and just start from scratch, and I could do that financially. But obviously, maintaining a almost $500,000 overhead per month it was a really stressful time, and I made some poor decisions around culture. But I look back on it, and I don't look at those as failures. I think those are, decisions that most entrepreneurs have some anxiety around. It was one of the greatest blessings for me. I learned more then during that insanely difficult time than ever, right? And it taught me really what leadership was. It taught me the importance of culture, and and I've been using a lot of the byproduct of those experiences. I use them daily.
So when you were going through that experience, what would you say is, if you were to go back and change or do something different, what would you say that might be? And I know that sometimes it's kind of hard to do because you always kind of look at things and go, probably nothing, because I would probably have made the same decision, give the same result, you're given the same experience again. But what would you say you could have probably done differently that might have mitigated some of this?
Great question. It's communication, right? And communication to my team, communication to my executive right and left hands. And I wasn't, right? And it was trying to mask the issues for fear that it would get worse. But I look at it and, that was probably the worst thing I could have done. But communication is just, trusting in a team and being open with everything. Because here's the thing. It's like during those difficult times, people know they can feel it. And I'm terrible at, not wearing my emotions on my sleeve. Right. And so, the lack of communication just had people come to their own conclusions. And so communicating with your team, very clearly communicating expectations, communicating what's going on, communicating what's being done. That was something, if I could go back and change it, that was definitely on the top of the list.
What were some of the thoughts going through your head when you started to have to make those hard decisions as well, following this tough decision of, having to let some of your people go that have been working with you for a while and things like that?
Well, and this is, again, it's one of those anxious moments where, you have so many things going through your head, right? And, me and the ego kind of stepped in and it was, why don't you guys figure this out? Why didn't you do this? Why don't you do that? And that's not leadership, right? And that's where I really learned that, making assumptions that people know what to do is, that's why the, ass out of you and me comes from assume. Because I made wrong assumptions. I realized that leadership really is the other way around, which is inspiring people to be better. And when you combine that with communication, man, people can do some amazing things.
Well, let's shift here and talk about another tough decision that you've had to make as an entrepreneur that had a really good and positive outcome and some of the lessons that you learned through that.
Well, interestingly enough, it was on the kind of tail end of this experience. So, I grew up on the East Coast, lived there my whole life, and I moved out, out west. And really didn't have any, deep-rooted relationships. And so a lot of my friends, I work way more than I should, but I started to develop friendships within the business. And, there were these two guys that were, they were great friends. And, I confided in them in different things and talked through certain things. And during that difficult point, they had done some things that, were not above board. And so as I was starting to rebuild culture and establish values and establish, certain principles that we were trying to lead and operate by, they pushed and resisted on that and actually did some things that were, like I said, above board. And so I actually dismissed them from the office. And at the time it was like, okay, are we going through this whole thing again? But I realized that because I had started establishing certain ways in which we were doing leadership, our values, what was, in bounds and what was out of bounds, that it actually drove some stakes into the ground and just showed that, I was putting my, money where my mouth was. And it was hard. It was a super difficult decision. We don't have a relationship to this day, unfortunately, but it's one of those things where, it was, kept me up at night a lot. And all these events really did. And it kept me, just studying and learning, like, how can I do this better? How can I be a better leader? What is good leadership? What are the styles of leadership? What style aligns with me? But in the end, like I created just a group, such a solid group of leadership here that, I was out of town for last over a week, and I'm going to be out of town for another couple of weeks starting next week. And, things operate in a way that's just magical. And that's what can occur, really, if you understand those principles of leadership and communication, and then you form a team that has that as its foundation.
So I want to talk about this friendship that you were talking about in the business that you had created with these other people that you had to let go, because I think a lot of times we can sometimes get too close to some of the people that we work with. It is hard to make those tough decisions to let somebody go when they're not doing things the way they should be and various things like that. How did you feel after, because obviously it was keeping you up at night, and I have a thing that I always do that my wife and I always talk about is, if an employee or something keeps me up more than like two nights in a row, then I need to probably get rid of them or let them go or something, because it's probably not, it's not healthy, right? What did you feel after you had made that tough decision and actually let them go?
Well, it was one of those, it was new into our new business rhythm. And, Simon Sinek has just an amazing way in which he articulates what leadership is. And I realized that I was a terrible leader when I dismiss people, let people go just because we weren't making money, not because they weren't doing their job or not aligning their work ethic around values. But that's where Simon Sinek, it's beautiful, because essentially a good culture, decisions happen through values. So one of our values is show up and play all out, right? So it's clear to everybody that this is what showing up means and this is what playing out all means. Speed you have is another one, right? If you're not getting results, then it means that there's something you have to learn that you currently don't know. And so as we started to use those as kind of the catalyst to make decisions, this either works or it doesn't work. And so I had to make the hard decision to dismiss them. And it ended up working because, it showed that this is how we're going to be managing and leading. And it's kind of a mutual accountability, not necessarily a top-down accountability, which rarely works these days.
What are some of the strategies that you use when you face a tough decision?
I have a great team around me. I also look at those values, understand those values and how they apply to the specific decision at hand. They have to align with those. But then having a team around me where we make the decision, not I make the decision, is huge because you get buy-in from everyone. And it shows that you're essentially showing value to their strengths. You're showing respect of their strengths, and they're showing respect to yours, as a reciprocity. So, yeah, that's what I would say regarding that.
We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Patrick about a series of quick questions and answers that we call the trifecta. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com. And we are back. And Patrick, I want you to go over this series of quick questions and answers that we call the trifecta by starting us off and talking to us about your favorite technology that you use in business that helps make your life easier every day.
Zoom. Seriously, and I know, we're on Zoom right now recording, but I don't do phone calls, right? I really believe in nonverbal communication and how much that communicates. And so when I'm meeting with strategic partners or meeting with clients or meeting with, my team that works remotely, a face and hands and body movement and tonality, obviously you can get that through a phone call. But Zoom and doing video calls has been bar none the best tool I've ever had.
And what's a favorite quote that you've heard that has helped you as an entrepreneur?
It ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you think you know that just ain't so.
And what's a favorite book that has helped you make better decisions as an entrepreneur?
Simon Sinek's books, as well as Cameron Herold. Cameron Herold's, runs the COO Alliance. But during this whole mess, I relied on them as kind of like my, non-face-to-face mentors. So, Start with Why and How to Find Your Why by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek, Double Double by Cameron Herold, and Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. And Traction, there's some other kind of like leadership systems type of books, but those guys are just incredibly inspiring and knowledgeable as it pertains to business culture. And so as far as the topic we've been talking about, I would say those are the books, those are the people that just completely changed my life.
So what's the next thing for you right now on your vision or dream board?
Well, we're a web-based company, right? So we have, 40 people in our office plus, 20 advisors that work remotely. And, looking at the employment situation at hand, it's so fascinating to see what's going on. Here in Salt Lake City, we have zero unemployment, and it's been very, very difficult to find good people. And so over the next 18 months, my big thing is transitioning to, leadership team being here, but most of our other staff being remote and working wherever, Hawaii, Florida, wherever, Alaska, wherever they want. And so right now, that's what I'm in the process of getting in place, which requires, just really good accountability, really good systems. We use another tool that has been invaluable has been Workplace, which is a software by Facebook where, for hardly any money at all, you can have your business like internal intranet social system, which is basically an instance of Facebook. And it's been unbelievable as far as chat, video, posting, inspiration, rallying the team, getting everybody to kind of come together and unite, right? And so that's going to be a tool as well as we transition to a more virtual office place.
Well, I will second that as well, Patrick, because that is all of the medical practices that we have, all 5 locations and 50 employees. We use the same software. We use Workplace, and we like it a lot. We've gone through several other ones, and that's the one we like the most.
Yeah, I got a quote right before we were part of the original 50 beta group, and I got a quote to do something like that for over 7 figures. And when this came out, it's like, it's a couple bucks a month per employee. It's incredible the value that's there. So kudos to Mark Zuckerberg.
Yes, kudos for sure. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for taking some time to be with us here today. How can the listeners reach out to you if they want to contact you, follow you more, or maybe even join your team?
Sure. Yeah. I would say the best kind of central place is either LinkedIn or wrote a book called Heads I Win, Tails You Lose. So it's the website's headsortailsiwin.com. And that just has all the ways to get a hold of me.
Great. Well, thank you again, Patrick, for taking the time to be with us here today. Looking forward to continue to follow you and looking forward to having you on a future episode as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur.
I would love it. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.